to the world. Subscribe now to the Hot 97 YouTube channel. It's Ebro in the Morning with Laura Stiles and Rosenberg.
We got Maya Wiley back on. She about to bust some bars today. Getting to this New York rap talk with mayor candidate Maya Wiley. No, I'm just playing. It's Ebro, Laura Rosenberg. Maya was getting some smoke last night on stage on ABC 7 during the mayoral debate. How did you feel about the debate last night, Maya?
Well, I always feel good about debates because, one, I am a lawyer and one who's been in the trial room. And look, this was an excellent opportunity to share with New Yorkers exactly what I see as our incredible opportunity to be courageous and do some things we've never done before, like invest in our communities in ways that fix what was broken before COVID. And so for me, the opportunity to do that was tremendous, and I was grateful for it.
I watched I believe I caught about 45 minutes of the whole hour. When I turned it on, there was a big kerfuffle back and forth. I think it was you and Yang and Mayor Ray and you guys. Meanwhile, on the other side of the stage, Diane Morales and Eric Adams was just sitting there quiet.
Did you just say Mayor Ray? Is that what you just said, Ebro?
Or Ray for mayor. What's his thing? Yeah, I call him Ray for mayor.
Yeah, for Maya.
You could go Mayor Maya too.
Mayor Maya for mayor. My bad. But yeah, they were on the other side of the stage. But was that one of the more heated exchanges that you guys have had with everyone present that's running for office?
Oh, I think it definitely was. It was. Let me just say this. One of the things that's so important about any debate, which has not happened as much in this election because of COVID, because of Zoom, because of all the things that have been so unusual about it, is there hasn't been as much opportunity to really get into what we disagree about. There's been a lot more about what we agree about. And I think, part of what was happening, and let's be honest, as the progressive in this race that can win it, and become the first Black woman to be mayor of New York City. I'm not in this race because I share the views of everyone who is running. If I did, I wouldn't be running. And so, part of what happens is, you hear a candidate say something and you know that there's something that the voter needs to understand about what they're saying and what they're not saying. Because you want voters to be able to make a full decision of their own, because we know New Yorkers make up their minds for themselves, and that's the way it should be in any democracy, but it should be fully informed. And that means the ability to also challenge if you're hearing something that is not consistent, not correct with the facts, or something that won't work.
Last night, a lot was, I think we've reached a point in this mayor race where candidates have, like you just pointed out, started calling each other out for the things that are inconsistent or, don't support the image that they're giving to the people. Both Eric Adams and Andrew Yang have been, I think, consistently discussed lately with regard to them being supported by billionaires who want to influence raising the cap on charter schools instead of putting more money into our public schools, as well as them receiving money from police, which is why they are going soft on the police reform that needs to take place. Maya, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I have to say it's why I'm coming hard in the ad that I released this week. In the statements I've made about the racism that we have heard from the Sergeants Benevolent Association's president, Ed Mullins, who talked about Black people as if we just sit on public paychecks as opposed to add value and have built this country. And the crossroads we face, we keep having this debate as if with rising crime rates, our only choice is to give police officers free rein over our communities rather than a balanced approach that builds our communities up and focuses police on the right job. And for me, both as a Black woman, as someone who has a godson I've had to go to court with my godson, who lives in public housing in Soundview, because he gets summonsed for riding his skateboard while black. He gets summoned for sitting in the park while black. And we can't keep going backwards to the same broken strategies that just traumatize our kids when we have the opportunity and, frankly, the dollars, the resources to invest in them if we're willing to say they're worth investment. And I'm not just willing. I'm a mom. I'm saying our kids deserve those investments, and it's time we get it right. And so this is, I think, a very critical issue in a time of COVID, in a time when our communities continue to be rocked by gun violence, and in a time when we have the opportunity to say, look, yeah, who are you here for? And who has helped put you here? Because the people who put me here are our people.
You know, last night they were asking you about diverting $1 billion from the NYPD to more services to, invest in the community. And the man at the debate, I think he was one of the moderators, kept saying, so do you want to shrink the police department? You want to shrink the police department, of which you articulated that you wanted to not have new recruits for 2 seasons, I think, upcoming 2 seasons, and use the money that would have gone to that to invest in the communities. But in effect, that is in some way shrinking the police department, correct? Because you'll have retirees and no new recruits, correct?
You're absolutely right, Ebro. And he asked me, he followed up and said, but doesn't that mean fewer police officers? But aren't you talking about reducing police officers? And I said, yes. Because look, one of the things that we have to face, and I said it in the debate last night, and I say it everywhere I can, what New Yorkers need to understand is that we have a police force that is the size of and larger than most armies in this world. Armies. And the idea that we have not enough police officers, when we have 2 police officers sitting in patrol cars, thousands at a time all over this city, and in Black communities, like in Southeast Brooklyn, like in the Bronx, where we have high rates of gun violence. By the way, the same communities that in 1993 had the highest rates of gun violence. Not new here, but we have the lowest rates of actually solving the homicides in Black and brown communities.
So you're saying in communities where there are tons of police officers and crime has always been a problem, clearly having police there is not solving the problem.
It has not solved the problem. It didn't solve it in 1993. It hasn't solved it in 2021. And the point about getting smart, one, is to recognize, how are we balancing? Yes, do we need police? Of course we need police. But we need police to do the job of policing and do it well, and not waste our resources just adding police officers constantly and growing the size of the police force as we have done. As crime rates go down, we just kept throwing more police officers, even though we didn't need them. Because what we needed to do was make it easier to get a job than a gun. If you go and talk to communities suffering from high rates of gun violence, as I have, actually can walk out my house and went on a summer vigil this summer to where literally 7 young people were murdered. I could walk through my neighborhood to 7 sites, murders that happened within about a 3-week period of time. And we got plenty of police officers. And in fact, when my friend lost his nephew in October in Bed-Stuy, his nephew, 4:30 p.m., Shaheem McClain, shot and killed going to the corner store. They put more police officers on the corner that night because of his murder. And yet, in plain sight of the police officers, half block down, 2 more shootings. Plain sight. It is not the presence of the police that keeps us safe from gun violence. It is the intelligence of how we use our dollars, both to focus the police resources we have on keeping the illegal guns out of our city, off our streets, but also the partnerships with community that build up the community. Because when jobs go up, violence comes down. When we recognize, as violence interrupters told me on one of our vigils, said, you look at these candles we put out every time a kid is killed, right? We see it, and it's devastating. The candles, the teddy bears, the wreaths, the photos, they go back to each candle and find out who put it there, because that is trauma, and it is trauma that may result in a revenge shooting. But what they do is they intervene as peer mental health counselors. And I'm going to invest in making sure we can get true trauma care services as well as the violence interruption. And so that we're having our kids send their graduation rates up while bringing the violence down. That's just a smart strategy that says we need both, and we can have both. And we need to be courageous enough to recognize now is the time to stop looking at 1993 and 2021, continuing to use the same broken strategies to continue to fail to solve the problem.
And how do you think? I'm sorry, Laura. I was just saying, I love your approach to this stuff. It's why I think it's why you're definitely in my top 3, and why I think you're an awesome candidate. How do you communicate this to all the people who have been sort of fear-mongered repeatedly that the city's so dangerous and they're not going to feel safe, and if we do things like this, that in some way they're not going to feel safe if a robber shows up, to their bodega or to their home? How do you sort of combine these ideas, which all make sense, while also recognizing that we live in a city where people have been scared for a long time? They've been made to feel scared that this city is dangerous.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And thank you for the kind words. Look, I've been Black all my life. And there are only 2 things I have to do in life. Stay Black and die. Everything else is a choice. And it's true for society too. We have lots of choices. The way I approach it is to say, I feel you, because I know what it feels like to fear crime. I know what it's like to have family members who've been victimized by violence. And I know what it feels like to fear police violence. And we all do. I have a white neighbor who we were having this conversation, and he was asking about, but what about more police? Don't we need more police? And I said this to him, and he said, and he started telling me a story where he was abused by the police. And I'm not saying it's all police. That's not the point. And we got to stop talking about good apples, bad apples. We need to change the system. But when I start with, okay, so let's talk about how we stay safe. And when I talk about mental health services, because one of the things that everyone in this city knows, because we're experiencing it firsthand, we have a mental health crisis in this city. We've actually had it for a long time, right? Street homelessness represents mental health issues that we have failed to solve. But it's also now, in the time of COVID, it's gotten so much worse. Domestic violence rates have gone sky high. And rape, we don't even talk about the fact that rape is up 52%. But what I talk about is, let's look at where we actually need to fear violence and figure out the right resourcing for police around being smart and focusing on it and solving it. And let's look at what creates the kind of conditions to prevent the violence before it happens. Because the thing about mental health, and we've seen it on the subways, we've seen it on the streets. And I had a woman just yesterday, a Black woman, stop me and say, what are we going to do? I feel unsafe. What are we going to do about mental health? And I said, boom, there it is, right? It's a recognition that if we're not addressing and solving the mental health crisis, we're not going to solve the violence crisis. We're not. And so here is with Rikers as our largest psychiatric institution in the city, Rikers Island. What does that tell us? It's that we haven't created the mental health crisis response, not the job of the New York City Police Department, shouldn't be the job of the New York City Police Department. They don't sign up for the job to be mental health crisis responders. They don't even like to do it. And getting mental health crisis responders to be the folks who respond, but then having the connective services all the way through to supportive housing for folks, so that we're actually helping them get the help they deserve, and that is their right as a human being, that prevents them from being on a subway, scared, imbalanced, and doing something dangerous. So that is, when I start to talk about it that way, I haven't had anyone say, well, you're right about that. Even people who want more police say, no, the police should not be responding to mental health crisis calls. You're right. We need to solve mental illness. Then when I point out to them, 40% of the calls in New York City Police Department, at least 40%, depending on what data you look at, is about mental health.
Right.
So rather than investing in more police, why don't we invest in more mental health? Because that would take away so many of their calls.
I'm curious because I've had these conversations with friends of mine that are police officers, and I've had a lot of them share with me. They're like, because I asked him, how do you feel about the term defund the police? And he's like, actually, I'm for it because I don't want to be sent to calls where we're dealing with mental health crisis. He was like, that's not for me. Yeah. So have you had conversations with police officers? And I'm just curious to see how those went.
So the short answer is yes. And for a long time, one of the things that I'm grateful for working in City Hall as the first Black woman to be a council to New York City mayor, and proud of what I was able to help achieve there with a team of folks focused on making some change, like universal pre-K, like sanctuary city legislation, the first we ever passed in this city. But I talk to police officers all the time, both the NYPD brass, top brass, but I tell you, the best conversations I had that were the smartest and most instructive were with the rank and file. And this was the point I've been trying to make every time I can talk about this. When you hear the Police Benevolent Association, and Laura, you're pointing this out, police officers complain constantly if you talk to them off the record and just as people with a relationship about how bad the management is inside the New York City Police Department. We wouldn't tolerate management this bad in other agencies of government.
Right.
But they become untouchable in this way that makes no sense for public servants, and it doesn't serve the police officers. And the unions, the Police Benevolent Association, Sergeants Benevolent Association, nothing benevolent about them because they never saw a reform that they thought they could support. But the problem is they're not representing their officers, because their officers, back when Eric Garner was murdered by Daniel Pantaleo, the conversations I was having with rank and file members, now we're feeling scared and worried and up because they feel they have a very hard job, and they do, and a stressful one, and one where they don't feel supported. But it very quickly became clear that they don't feel so supported, not just outside, because they wanted more vests. They wanted upgraded vests they had gotten. They wanted to know that they would be supported and not punished by doing the right thing and partnering with community. I talked to a police officer, Puerto Rican police officer, combat veteran, over 20 years on the force. He said, Maya, when I wanted to do community policing and I played basketball with the kids on the court, I got fined 14 vacation days for playing basketball with kids on the court. Now
that's the biggest deal with rank and file is their vacation days, because it's hard to get vacation days.
It's the biggest deal. And for them, it's like, and then they're getting punished for having a relationship. Now, that was under Ray Kelly, but they had so much distrust for doing the job right, because they also feared how they would be managed and treated internally. So we have to recognize they know they're being asked to be social workers. They're being asked to be parents. They're being asked to be, and they're being asked to be police officers all at the same time. And they are not equipped for all of that. And it's not why they signed up for force. So Laura, those are the exact same conversations I was having. And I can tell you, whether Black, Puerto Rican, white, male, female, Republican, or Democrat, I never talked to a police officer that didn't have some serious complaints with how they were managed and how policing was managed from inside the department. And so when I talk about smart policing, it is because I've listened to police officers. And one thing I will do as mayor, because, and I said this yesterday in response to being attacked by the racist unions for calling for reform, is I said, no, police officers are people and they deserve to be treated well. And the police unions aren't protecting how they're being treated inside. And that's what I will do as mayor, because I'm going to make sure they get rewarded for doing what's right, because that is going to help change not only the culture, but also get to a place where we can have a real conversation about, right, what you don't want to be responding to, what some other agency of government should take on. You shouldn't have to do that. And we're going to make sure you don't have to.
And what about the police commissioner? I think we discussed this before. Are you going to have a civilian commissioner or someone from inside?
I'm going to have a civilian commissioner. I'm going to have someone who did not come up through the rank and file. And let me be clear, it is not because I don't know. I know that there's some very good leaders inside the New York City Police Department, but we have to break down this culture, and it's very hard, even for wonderful people who have been inside that department for years, because there is so much pressure. There's so much internal pressure. And we have to create some vehicles and mechanisms of leadership that take that pressure off, but also make sure that it's truly accountable to the courageous reforms we need to make. And the other thing I'm going to do, because it's not only having a mission-driven, reform-driven, smart, expert commissioner who can break through the internal stuff inside the department, it's going to be to have a civilian commission that sits on top of the department, because what we need to do is put the people back in public safety, have a voice for the public and a civilian group that really sets the rules of the road for policing, the priorities of policing, where rapes are up 52%. When we talk about a rise in violent crime, how much conversation have you heard about rape? It's up 52%, 52%. It's one of the most pressing violence problems. We need to have, but you don't hear about it in the public discussion about how violence is going up, like domestic violence. But that means we need a commission that sets the sights of the police department on the priorities.
Well, the police can't market that, and they can't get more support to get more money and more police officers when you're talking about domestic violence and rape. So they just make it all about gun violence and black men and gangs, and then people just want to put more police on the street.
Unfortunately, that is how the discussion goes, and this is the discussion we can change, and creating the folks who are elevating accountably neutral from work neutral, right? And neutral public oversight that says we want to hear from the public. We want to look at the data. We're going to be transparent with the public. It's a very, very hard thing to get the New York City Police Department to be open and transparent about what's going on. You know, we got to be truthful about the fact that police precincts, you know, there's stuff they do to make sure the data looks the way they want it to look. Now, I don't mean it's all bad or wrong data, but we do have to recognize the incentives are wrong. We need to incentivize being honest about where our problems are and what they are. We need to be honest about whether it's a police function to solve it or whether we need something else. And we need to be able to be honest about what the rules of the road need to be, because one of the problems that we have right now is that we have way too much gray area on what is excessive force. Camden, New Jersey, this is another thing about being smart. Let's be clear. Camden, New Jersey radically reduced, almost ended police violence because they created an 18-page excessive force policy that said what you could and could not do. 18 pages. Go look at the New York City Police Department's patrol guide, and you will only see about 3.5 pages, I think, of excessive force. There's a lot of gray area. That is unfair to the police officers who are like, I don't even know what I can do anymore because I do something, I think I have discretion, and then I'm in trouble. And that's not fair to the police. It's also not fair to the public who says, wait, something just happened to me. It was wrong. It shouldn't have happened. And then they go to try to get justice and accountability for it. And they're told, well, right? I mean, it's not so clear it was a violation. So we got to get clear, and this civilian commission that I'm going to put in place is going to make that clear, working with everyone, but transparent, make sure everybody knows the rules of the road. But then if you go off-roading, you done been told, because this is how mamas roll. I'm going to tell you what you can and cannot do. And look, you do right, mama's got you. You decide you're going to do what I told you not to do, there's going to be some consequences for you. But I told you beforehand, and you made a choice. And that's how we need to be fair and safe and just with policing.
Maya Wiley, polling. I think you're still polling in the top 5 there. So that's doing very, very well. And, some people think you're catching steam. Do you look at these polls? Because it seems every day I look and I see reports, this person's up, this person. Do you give any weight to those things? What are the indicators that you as a candidate actually look for?
Well, I thank you for that question, because I think the polls are really misunderstood. I only look at the polls to understand how everyone's going to talk about the race, not because we're going to run by polls. I think we learned in a couple elections, let's take 2016, that polls aren't necessarily going to tell us who really is winning a race. And in this race, that is so much more true than it was in 2016. If you look at the most credible pollsters for New York City politics, right? Marist, Quinnipiac, they're not polling this race. There's a reason they're not polling this race. And
they're not even doing it.
They're not even doing it. And the part of the reason the polls are a little low, I think the polls are not wrong generally about who's in the top tier. I will say that. But, who's first and third and fifth and fourth, the reality is so many voters have not made up their minds about who they're voting for. And other voters who have said, well, here's my candidate. I was having a conversation yesterday in Flatbush and last week up in Harlem, where I had people say, well, I was going to vote for Eric Adams, or I was going to vote for Scott Stringer, but now that I've talked to you, I'm going to vote for you. And I think that's the fluidity of this race, right? The best thing you can say about this race is it's wide open, that voters are just in earnest starting to turn their attention to this race because folks are exhausted. Folks have been traumatized. We've had it rough for 18 months. We've lost 33,000 people. We've got kids been struggling with online learning. I mean, we've been dealing with so much, and there's so much pain in the city. It's not surprising. But so what I look at is wide open. And one of the things that's very clear to us and why we're catching steam is when people actually hear who I am and what I stand for and what my plans are, because I got them. And I'm the candidate that's not going to tell you I'm going to create hundreds of thousands of jobs, but not tell you how I'm going to pay for it. I've told you exactly, I'm going to create 100,000 jobs. I know exactly how I'm paying for it. By increasing the capital construction budget and putting folks to work, building things we need built and fixing things we need fixed, by creating universal care centers that are going to create jobs for women of color who lost jobs in care, but also to provide care for that families right now can't afford, that also puts money back in their pockets, but helps them get back to work. I know how to get this done. But when I talk about this and when people finally get the opportunity to hear it, whether it's now through our advertisements or through debates, or just being able to be out in the public and with folks and with all of the powerful supporters I have from 1199 SCIU, over 200,000 voting members who reside in our communities, but also people like the Brooklyn congressional delegation from Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez, Congresswoman Katie Porter now, supporting me, Cecile Richards, who lives on the Upper West Side, powerful leader in her own right. These folks are coming out and telling other people as well who I am and what I will do and why they support me. And this is why we're catching fire, because it is about the courage of this city to remake it. Because the one thing every New Yorker knows is that stuff was broken in January 2020. It wasn't working for us then. it's worse now, we're not just going to crawl back to 2020. We're going to come together and use this opportunity to actually become a city that's great to live in every community, including Black communities and Latino communities that I am not afraid to name, because it is our communities that also need to be able to recover and be remade to be great places to live. When people hear that, I gain support, and that's why I'm catching fire.
Maya Wiley, look, best of luck to you. Like Rosenberg said, you're one of our top candidates. We definitely believe the words you're saying. Of what you have proposed, because I always try to remind voters that when anyone's running for office at any level, they have proposals. These are their plans. These are not guarantees that they will get done. What are the things that you know right away you can get done when you get this job?
Well, I know right away that I can have a police commissioner that's going to be on mission and create this commission that's going to create better police accountability and smarter policing. Because I get to make those, decisions, and we've got plenty of partners to help get it done. But we didn't talk about education and housing. So one, I know I can hire 2,500 more teachers and more teachers who look like our students to bring down our class sizes. And I know I can end discriminatory practices in admissions in our public school system. That's power I have as mayor. I know I can create 100,000 jobs because I'm going to do it by doubling the size of our capital construction budget to $10 billion from $5 billion. I have the power to do that as mayor. I don't need agreement from Albany or dollars from DC to do that. And that's putting our public dollars at work for our people. And I know I can create more deeply affordable housing as a result, because that capital construction dollars, we use those dollars to build housing. And I'm going to make sure that our home health aides can afford the housing. I'm going to make sure that our people who stock grocery store shelves can afford the housing. I'm going to be making sure that the people who help this city run and help us all work are also able to afford the rent. And I know one other thing, because I just announced this week, but I announced a rental subsidy, not just creating new housing, but a rental subsidy for any family earning $54,000 or less to make sure they can stay in their apartment. That is something that we can do that is going to stop the evictions, that is going to make sure that as the rents increase, even if people's paychecks don't, they will be able to stay in their homes. And that is critically important, because if you're in Kingsbridge Heights, if you're in Mariners Harbor, if you're in Corona, Queens, if you're in so many neighborhoods, those are the neighborhoods with the highest eviction rates right now. And we are the people who have seen the struggle of the ability to be able to pay the rent no matter how hard we're working. And I know I can change that too.
Maya Wiley, thank you for that. And good luck. Thank you for joining our program again.
I appreciate you all, and I hope I earn your number one. And I hope everyone votes me number one on June 22nd or starting June 12th when we start with early voting. And please don't forget to rank candidates. Don't lose your voice. Don't rank only one person. If there's a runoff, we want everyone's voice to count. Rank up to 5, at least 3, but I really encourage everyone to rank up to 5 candidates.
Maya Wiley for mayor. Go check her out. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Maya.
All right. Be safe and well.
See you soon.
All right.